This is the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 005, Free Range Storytelling with Marianne Cantwell. This episode of the Word Slinger Podcast is brought to you by Happy Pants Creative. We connect you to the marketing and creative resources you need to help your business do more business. Get started at happypantscreative.com.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey, how's everybody doing? I got a little distracted there for a second. I should call this episode Word Slinger Redo or something along those lines, because I swear to you, this is the 5th time I've recorded this particular intro, and the biggest reason is because, well, there are 2 reasons, actually. The first is that I actually recorded this interview with Marianne Cantwell. We did 2 interviews. We did the first, and it didn't turn out quite the way we wanted. We both sort of felt a little disappointed in it, because it was we both fell into sort of these old routines we have, in which we basically I played the part of the interviewer and she was the interviewee, talking about and promoting her work, which she's done 1,000 times, so it didn't have the juice we were looking for, and it wasn't about story. It was about, which is fine. It was a story, and so it fits. But we had really been excited about talking about this aspect of story as it relates to your career and your life, and how it's interwoven and how your experiences play in, and that was going to be really cool. And we didn't talk about it at all. So she was very gracious and wrote me the next morning and said, "Hey, you mind not using that interview?" And then she agreed to do another one, and we did. And I'm so glad we did, because it was so very cool to, first of all, to talk to her again, and second of all, to really dig in on that topic. And she did a great job. It turned out much better. We were much more excited. We were much more enthusiastic. So you're going to get to hear that in just a second. But the other thing that's the other redo part of this episode, I've recorded this intro like 4 or 5 times now. Only a couple of those because of the flub on the interview, which wasn't really a flub. I mean, it was a great interview, and one day I may actually play some of it. But the thing that I kept screwing up was I have this recording booth, and when I record these wrappers for each episode, I use the same booth, but for some reason I was getting this weird, like, distant audio, and I just figured out that it's been recording from the mic on the computer rather than my studio mic. So I don't know when that happened. I don't know when that switched. The other episodes didn't have that glitch, so here we go. Here we are. So anyway, see, I don't hide anything from you guys. It's all part of the story, right? What's a story without a little bit of conflict? So here we are once again with Marianne Cantwell. You're hearing her for the first time. You're going to love this interview. So that's Marianne Cantwell, author of Be a Free Range Human, and you can check her out online at her website, free-range-human.com. And without any further delay, hear that music? That means we're going in. I give you Marianne Cantwell. Hi guys, so I am here with Marianne Cantwell, and actually, because this is the podcast that's focused on the story, there's a behind the scenes story here, because you and I actually talked before, and you came back and asked me very politely not to use that interview, and I agreed with you 100%. Do you do you want to talk about a little why we decided to do that?
Yeah, and actually, oddly enough, the reason was not because there was anything in there that hadn't been talked about, but actually because of story. And the story that I've been talking about, or I had been for a few years, was about how I quit my job and all that stuff. And the thing I told you, Kevin, was actually this podcast is interesting because we talk about story. And all I did in the other podcast was share my story. If you want to see my story, you can Google me.
Yeah.
And so I actually asked you if we could actually I guess, talk about the impact of story in my journey and yeah, to
And
have a
you're
bit of
so
a deeper
you're
conversation.
so sweet to do that because and I never would have said a thing and I kind of after the end of our conversation was feeling like I had really blown it because I hadn't done the cool interviewer thing where I sort of pulled out the actual nuggets we were after. So I bombed there. You don't have to.
I love this intro actually because it's like you never see the outtakes and
Oh
I feel
no,
like I love it. It's like you just started the movie with the
that's
outtakes.
right. That's right. That's how we roll on the Word Slinger podcast. So, okay. So I love that you are on board with this because this is exactly the kind of thing I think people are interested in. I know it's the thing I'm interested in, and in our emails back and forth, you actually brought up the idea that it's story and experience that are actually what people buy now, and I love the way that phrasing works because it's what you're selling when you're out there. Especially like I'm an author, so I'm trying to sell actual fiction stories and nonfiction work. But as far as when I coach people on branding and anything marketing related, I'm coming at that from that same angle. Is what the idea is what you're selling is that story. So I'd love to hear your take on that. Did I just did I
No,
just
that's
catch
perfect.
you? Okay.
Um, I think yeah, story is. I think the first thing is that it's when you're trying to come up with a story for who you are
Mhm.
and what your business is, right? And all the marketing stuff, that
Yeah.
you know so much about. There is so many layers, and I think one of the things that I came up against quite a few times when I was first understanding this concept of story and how you do it yourself and how you coach people on it is that there is no one story for anyone.
Right.
There's no one story for any business, and you have to choose which part of your story you want to have be the main narrative framework. So I always think about like a movie. If you're in you see a movie, there could have been so many stories. There could have been the story of the driver. There could have been the story of what happened in that person's work life, but there wasn't. There was a narrative.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of us, I think, sometimes get confused about is which story do you want to focus on? Because you can choose any of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first starting point is what do you want to do, what do you want to be,
I
and
think I think
yeah,
that scares people too, and frankly, it scares me sometimes. I did a whole exercise today because I recently, like all good coaches and motivational people, I looked back at some of Tony Robbins' stuff this past couple
yeah,
of days because I was feeling a little kind of whenever I'm feeling a little down, that's what I start doing is looking back at the stuff that inspired me in the past. So and that idea of defining my story gets a little scary for me at times. And I know it was a lot scarier back when I first encountered this stuff, but I know that's one thing that like some of my clients run into is when I'm doing author coaching. The first thing that we talk about is the book, right? Like what's the story about? And there's a huge hesitation there. Like they don't know what the story is, but like if you spend all this time writing it or plotting it and everything, but they're afraid to commit to what that story is.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Because, and I think sometimes you don't even know what it is.
No.
You're too close to it.
Yeah. Especially in career.
Oh my God, I know. It's funny, isn't it? Like, especially in career, because you're living it. You're the main character in your
Right.
story,
Right.
and you're not the the narrator,
Right.
and the narrator has a different view.
You can't just rewrite that scene.
No, and you can't go. When you're watching a movie and you're like, oh my God, he's around the corner. Can't you tell? It's like, no, you can't tell because you're in the moment. So I think the
Right.
first thing is actually going, how can you or who can help you get a bigger look at who you are and what you're doing. And I think
Mm.
that's like number one step is going from being in something to having a bird's eye view. And I think that
Oh,
actually goes across. I'm really glad you started out asking about marketing. So I feel that there's actually the whole question of, if I help people out with defining their business, I don't find that particularly different to helping someone work out who they are, or particularly different to helping someone sell a product.
Right.
It actually is it's the same. It's honing in and understanding what's the core that you've got. What's the core thing here that we want to bring out? And we'll take what's on the inside and put it on the outside, which to me is 100%. That's what marketing is. It's inside on outside. And it's also what choosing your life direction is. Find the inside, go, how can you make that on the outside? So it just feels like it's a constant unwrapping process. And it's also evolving as well, because your story today, might not be the story you're going to look at in however many years' time.
Yeah. How do you start that then? I mean, I like that idea of finding people who can help you get that perspective, because that's where it starts. And I always come at this there's two perspectives I carry in my head, two little frameworks there in my head, which is the marketing side and the publishing side. And on the publishing side, it's that beta reader, it's those your ideal reader, as Stephen King puts it, the person you're actually writing for. And on the marketing side, it's the audience you're trying to reach. You can go and test a concept and do a lot of A/B testing and do a lot of concepting in public to see who likes what. But when it comes to shaping the story of your life, who do you turn to?
You know what? That's such a good question. And
we only ask the easy questions here.
How do you shape your life story? Let's do that in 10 seconds. Here's what I found really helpful. When I was writing my book, I found that the thing I struggled with the most was my introduction. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting, and it's relevant to this because that was the part that was always going to include some of my story. So I had to decide what that was going to be. And I spent so long on that introduction. It was ridiculous. Quite a good one in the end, thank God.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did was I was talking to someone who was helping me out a bit, who is a storyteller. And the advantage of having a storyteller around is that she approached this from a really interesting perspective. And she was coaching me through it based on starting to understand the difference of classic narrative arcs, the different classic stories. Yeah, because there's a few really good books out that I can totally dig up for you on plot, on different. Yeah. I'm sure there's one that's super well known. Your listeners will already know what I'm talking about. But is different types of plot. There's some classic plots. Where's the hero's journey, and which one do you want? Because when you're deciding on your story, it's not just the theme. You can pick out a theme, which is one of the steps,
right.
But also what's the arc of that? So that's like literally was one of the first things. And I started realizing, okay, I need to work out my arc. And it took a lot of time and working that out. And a follow on from that, so kind of like a step deeper, is I think thinking about story within story.
Yeah.
Because I think that really helps. Because if you look at which stories you most naturally want to bring out and that people resonate with, those little mini ones, and you sort of map them into your bigger story. So I went from here to here, or this is the story I'm telling. Which of those are the highlight moments? Because I think they're going to tell you a lot about what you're really telling. It's kind of like, when someone's releasing a film, again, they'll pick the highlight clips. So what are your highlight clips? Because again, you can apply this to working out where you're going with your journey. Because when you know the highlight clips, there's going to be themes in those. And those themes are going to tell you a lot about where you want this story to go.
Right.
So I think there's actually quite a lot of factors. You're deciding on your main theme. So what is this about? You're deciding on your narrative arc, like who are you in this? Is this like rags to riches? Is this a hero's quest in this direction? Where are you? What do you play? And also to help you with that, what are the main moments? And put those together. And I think you can start to construct something for your business or yourself that's meaningful, and meaningful to you as well, a story that you want to tell, because you have to want to, you want to create a story you want to tell.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part.
I really love everything you're saying right now, because it totally validates all these random ideas I've had in my head about how story is just vital to any form of success. Because you read these guys like Tony Robbins and you. I mean, these people who inspire you to go out and try something new. and be adventurous and take action. And it really all boils down to that idea that you can write your story. That's hugely exciting for me, and I hope it's exciting for other people. I mean, that's what I counsel to people too. So
And it's 100%. Actually, my book actually starts out with a Steve Jobs quote,
yeah,
which kind of summarized the book. And it's the one about, I can't remember the exact words, but once you realize, the paraphrasing, that the people who made the rules or whatever, are no smarter than you, are
right,
no more entitled than you, and you can take life and you can shape it and mold it, that's when everything changes.
right,
And to me, that's how Opens book, that's what I'm all about in there. But actually, it's a remit for being the writer of the story
yeah.
every step of the way, and it's absolutely doable. Yeah,
Do
because
you,
it's funny because I started out doing what I'm doing now a while back, and it was 5 years ago today that I sent my very first Friday love letter, which was
yeah,
my sort of weekly, bi-weekly email, and that has been an exercise in storytelling. So I think the reason I raised that is I know when we were at this stage of going, either who am I or where am I going, or what is my business, what is my brand, it can be hard to know. And one of the best ways to find out is to write and publish regularly.
yeah.
So I didn't know what my story was and what my brand or whatever was until I started writing and publishing these weekly emails, sending them to people I didn't know every week without fail.
Right.
And that's the best way to find out.
And that I think is key, because discovery it's an action, it's a verb, right? I mean, you're actively looking, not passively waiting for it to hit you. So when you're trying to define who you are and discover who you are, you're out there, you're taking action. I love the Friday love letter idea. I mean, that's why I've kept up with you. I think first of all, you're telling me your story, but I get what you're saying, and that is that you're also defining that story for yourself each time you write one of those.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's what I tell people about blogging and any other resource. And I think I probably fall more into social media than blogging. Unfortunately, I love blogging, but the immediate feedback of social media feeds my ego. So apparently that's my story.
You're telling lots of mini stories.
That's right. That's what it is, right? I mean, it's like subplots. So for your arc, you don't have to know the end, right? I mean, you don't have to know. You want to know your general direction, your goals in your life, but do you need to know how it's all going to turn out in order to have your story arc?
Again, that's the fascinating. I think I told you this when we spoke last time. Again, you watch a movie, you see the ending. I mean, that's not the ending.
Right.
That's the ending of that story. As I say, it might end with the happy couple getting together.
Yeah.
That's the start of their story.
Yeah.
And we just saw the movie ending there. So, often where you see someone's story end is absolutely not where it ends. That's the point where the story ends, but your journey, your bigger narrative path continues. I mean, you can have a lot of sequels. You can have a lot of variations in your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to tell people from now on. Don't worry, you'll fix the rest of this in the sequel. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, one thing, Kevin, I think it's really, you've raised some really cool questions here and got me thinking. One thing I find, like, really consistently when you're trying to work out what is your story or what story do you have in you, is what is it that you do so easily, so effortlessly, that other people find difficult.
Yeah.
So in my book and in my writings, I talk about with the line, what can't you help doing? What can't you not do?
Right.
And we all have them. We all, like, there's a can't help it moment is what the free range phrase for it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to notice those because you can't help it, so you don't notice it. Now, everyone, you'll know other people who have this. So you'll have a friend who can always see the practical solution to something like physical or technical. You'll be like faffing around with an IKEA bed, and they'll be like, oh, well, it goes like this.
Yeah.
They can't help doing that. We all have them, even if you're like the least technical person in the world. You have something that you cannot help doing. Until you know that, until you hone in on that, it's actually harder to tell your story because you don't know which angle that you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what about experience in this? Where does that factor into this equation of story? Like, I would tell someone to draw on their experiences for not just Well, for example, when I do author coaching, I tell people to look back at other things they've done in their career to help guide them in building that as a business. Because a lot of people come into that not really realizing that it is a business. So, on my part, I drew from my marketing and creative background to do that work. So, what role do you see experience playing in sort of defining the story of your personal life beyond career or in career?
Ah, that's so interesting. I think there's this fascinating intersection between learnt experience and innate tendencies. And the issue can come when you have built up a lot of learnt experience that is completely outside of your innate tendencies. So, for an example in this is when I used to work for Disney, I did a lot of very detailed work with Excel sheets.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty good at analysis. I really am bad at detail. So if I'd chosen to continue that as my story, like on my resume in my life, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I'd be really unhappy and fairly average at what I was doing. So you do have to start getting curious. Which strand of your experience do you want to be in your story? And I think that's the key. You
Yeah.
get to choose. So, when I left that job, I was really clear. I was going to take something that was about 10% of that job, which is a lot about strategy, and I was going to make that my story. And so when I rewrote my resume for my next job, which was an amazing job in a consultancy, I was actually really suited me. It was my last ever job before I went free range. I went there with a story, and the story was about this particular very small chunk of experience that I had. And that was my story. I chose that story and I got the job because of that story. And I was better at that job because I knew that 10% of what I'd done in my old job should have been 100%.
Yeah.
And you get to choose. And I think it's really important. Often I see people say, well, I only have a little bit of experience in that. And it says, well, this isn't about making things up, but is about saying, hey, if that you have a little bit of experience in is so you need to own that because no one else is going to give you more of that.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I mean. So I agree with you. Yes, draw on your experience, but decide which one are you going to be, and use that.
I love that, and I saw that a lot. I've had so many careers. Like I've never been able to settle on one thing. I get bored and I move on. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I am that quintessential portfolio career guy that you're talking about in your book, by the way. And by the way, I want to tell you, I started rereading your book this past like 2 weeks ago because I wanted to make sure that I was, fresh. So all this stuff is fresh in my head. But I've had all these different careers and I've learned all these different things, and I pick and choose the pieces that I think are going to work, and then I customize, right? So not everyone's going to do that. I think that scares the crap out of my wife. I mean, she's got no interest in doing that. She wants to hone in on that one thing. So when you, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Story, right? That it's and that's a really cool difference as well.
Yeah.
To have,
Right.
And I think the bad side comes out when you tell yourself you've got to be more like that other person.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Continue.
Yeah. No. This is all about you. They hear me anyway. So.
That's good. I like that. No, I think that's the key. I think you just said it really nicely there. You're picking and choosing, and you've got your customizing, whereas your wife is someone who's more interested in having that one thing.
Yeah.
And something I see a lot for anyone who's resonated with what you've just said, you're someone who has lots of interests and lots of different things, is trying to shoehorn yourself forever into one forever path.
Yeah.
When you're not that person, that's just not a winning game, right?
No.
Like one of the things I talk about in my book is the concept of scanners. Barbara Sher, pretty well known in the US, wrote a book quite a few years back on I think it's called Refuse to Choose or something like that, and it's about scanners. And scanners are people who prefer to scan the world rather than diving deeply into anything. And Barbara's amazing. She's been a guest on some of my things, and she came up with this concept, and it's really resonated with a lot of people, a lot of writers actually, because what it doesn't tell you that means you should spin around and not do anything, not have any story. It actually tells you No, you need to allow that to happen, but you need to know how to handle that because the world doesn't teach you how to handle that. They say you're either doing one thing or you're doing like nothing well.
Right.
So there are ways to do that. And when you do that, you can have a fascinating story built up because you could be like, well, this is like the main thing I do, and I've got these other things on the side. And that is just, it's a really great way of enriching everything that you do.
Yeah, I think the reason writers resonate with that, I know this is why I resonate with it, is because I do pick up interests as I read, as I talk to people, as I do research, and suddenly my wife, ribs me about this all the time. But it's like I'll read a book about something, and suddenly I want to do that. Like I'm reading about archaeology, and now I want to go get an archaeology degree. And
I know.
writers do that though. Like we do that because we can express that in some way through our art or through our the skill that we have developed. I think. I mean, that's
We
why
find
I
everything fascinating. I
Yes.
find things just so interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, but then actually, yeah, but then again, not all writers do that. I'm thinking of
No.
a few friends of mine who are really, really focused people,
Yeah.
who are
And
amazing writers. So I think there's again different styles, different strokes for different people.
oh yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, clearly, because otherwise everyone would write the same kind of books and write, But then again, I'd have a lot more to read. So, which is not true actually. You know what I find I read most are those focused books. So I'll read like the Steve Jobs biography or, you know, something that's focused on one topic. So maybe the world needs those guys more than they need me.
I think they need everyone. You need
Yeah.
like well, actually, this is a great one for authors, is part of the way of getting, allowing yourself to have the story you want, but getting it out in a great way is to
Yeah.
make sure you have a little team of people that you can draw on of different personalities.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, do you work with an editor, for example?
I do. Yeah. I have a couple of people that I hand these things over to double
And are
check
some of
me.
them like a bit more focused in their
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
that's this is what's amazing. So I hired an editor, even though I was a published author in the UK. It works a bit differently. You still hire your own sort of book coach or editor, not for line editing, but for sort of overall.
Oh, okay.
And so I hired my own guy. He was amazing. So his personality type. Was very different to mine, and he was incredibly focused. He's actually an ex-engineer. He's actually in my book, so I was so interested in him. I was like, "You're fascinating. I want to write about you as opposed to you editing my book." And he was this ex-engineer who'd become, through various hilarious stories, a book coach and editor. And he took one look at my book and said, "This is amazing writing, and it's a terrible structure," and took it to pieces. I absolutely loved it. And I thought, you know what? Without someone like that, I'd never have a book like that really worked.
Right.
And that's the cool thing. I mean, we always say, I think we take a lot of responsibility for shaping our own stories, and we
Yeah.
need to. But actually, this is part of being able to choose your story. It's like to be able to say, hey, how much of this am I taking on? And which part of it can I say, hey, I could totally do that, but it's just not me. So I could do it if I have to do it, if I can't afford something, if I can't find someone, I can do it. But if I'm being honest, it's not me. So let me fill that gap. And I think that's where the best work comes from.
You know what? I love that, and I've said that like 20 times now. But that's because I think I love everything you say and do. um, but yes, and the interesting part about that, and if we're still drawing parallels to movies and books, I mean, stories that only have one character are pretty boring. I mean, they're or can be. So it's not the individual story that interests people. It's all the little subplots and all the things that connect to the story and like my wife loves reading things that are historic. She loves like the Ken Follett series and Fall of Giants and that sort of thing. But what she loves most about that is seeing all the connections to other things she's experienced or other things she knows about. And I think that's what most of us do. I know we do that in learning. Like that's how we learn is we connect a new idea to an old idea in its most basic form. So
Absolutely.
having those people, that you can draw on that have different skills from you, it's like adding new spices to the mix. You end up with a much better flavor, more, a fuller flavor, I guess.
Completely.
I must be hungry.
You got all the like foodie metaphors going. And I think a really big part of that, I think that's the sort of climax of the story, telling your own story is, and this is something that develops over time. This is why I'm a really big fan of writing and hitting post on a blog or whatever, because you get grounded. And you do need to have a grounding in being that main narrator, because it's a mistake I see a lot in with people who are less confident in their work is that they hand over responsibility too easily, and someone who's very different from them can shape the story to be more like that person rather than the author.
Yes.
So that's something you really, and I think it sounds easy at the outset, but if you, when you're in those moments where you're feeling unconfident or you're feeling a bit ungrounded in who am I, or what could I be, it's too easy to be shaped by someone else. So this is why I'm very much a fan of going, rather than going straight to either an editor or a friend for feedback. I mean, I don't do giving stuff to a friend for feedback ever. Like the only time I gave stuff to a friend for feedback was after months of working on my book, because I knew if I gave it too early, I wouldn't be grounded enough to be able to stand up and say, actually, yep, I can take that bit, but actually, no, I think that bit, if you didn't understand it, then I need to maybe move it instead of delete it. So you need to understand, have your understanding. And yet that could come from working with an author coach at the beginning, but there's a difference between a coach and the mistake I see is people randomly handing off for feedback all the time. I'm like, you're doing too early. You're asking the editor to come in when you're really on draft.
Yeah.
And so, this is my perspective. I'm sure it's very different for a lot of other authors, but the only way you can work out your story and your voice is to write and publish and write and publish. And that's why blogging's so great, because there's no formatting and whatever.
And also lowered expectations on the work, I think. I think that, although that's not quite true, because you get flamed when you do things wrong, but your expectations are lowered. Like when I write a blog post, I'm not quite as anal about it as I am. I mean, I am to a degree. Like, I want it to sound great. I want it to be in my voice, but I'm not quite as worried about how it's going to perform. So it takes some of the pressure off.
Yes. Oh my God, it does, doesn't it? It's a totally different ball game, which is why. And actually, the reason I started my Friday Love Letters, my newsletters, was that at the beginning, I wasn't even confident enough to post on a blog that could be findable by people who hadn't signed up to my email list. So I actually started this whole habit of not releasing everything I write to my blog because I wanted the freedom to write.
Yeah.
And it was such a good decision because I know there's stuff in my book, like the last chapter of my book was originally a Friday love letter, and it's quite a powerful ending. And that was a Friday love letter I wrote about a few years ago, just when I was writing my book, and released to my list. And because my list has chosen to sign up and read my emails, even though I've never met them and there's many thousands of them, it feels personal. And so I'm just so clear, all my best writing happened because I wasn't afraid to hit publish, but I would have been freaking out if it had been in a book from day one, 100%. So I think that's what we authors have to find is what's the space, because you can't just write and save it on your computer. It doesn't count and it doesn't have the impact for you. It's not the same. It just, like every time I do that, I sort of lose that work. It never really does anything because there's an interaction. I'm sure you mentioned it with social media between you and the reader. That's just so essential.
Do you still have all those posts that never made it onto the blog?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm supposed to be doing this today, compiling a bit of a sort of top 10 love letters to be released, for people who haven't been on the list from the beginning. I did, and actually a lot of them were in the book. So a lot of my book chapters were originally sort of a version of a love letter that never made it to the blog. And there's some of my posts are still a bit too personal. One that I'm putting in there, I'm not comfortable having that on the blog just because I know when you say there's sometimes you get this really personal level, and
Yeah.
if you have comments open, I don't want that crap. Some people do. I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So my most personal stuff, I'm like, if you can't put your email in and give that to me, I don't think I'm going to give you my personal story. It's just going to be the deal we've got running.
Okay, that's a fair deal. Yeah, I like that.
So everyone has their limits, and I just, when I started out, I used to think, there's a rules online, like you had to say release everything to the world, you had to do it in a certain way. And I met someone who said, yeah, no, I require that anyone who comes to my website puts their email address in before they see anything, like before they can enter. And I was like, why not? It's my space. This is my personal space.
True,
Why would you not see that? And I was like, you can do that? You're allowed to do that? And that was like, I haven't done that, but it was a light bulb moment where I just thought, this is your space. You can do what you want in your space. And it can change over time. And that's how the best writing happens.
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm kind of a whore when it comes to putting my stuff on the web, and I've got it everywhere. And in fact, I think you and I actually talked about this in the last time we chatted, which no one gets to hear. Ha ha ha. But there's another Kevin Tumlinson out there, and that poor bastard doesn't get to have any airtime. Like he actually renamed himself online to Kevin Adonis Tumlinson, and I'm like, nice try, guy. You're good looking. I'll give it to you, but you're never going to own this space. So, but because
brilliant.
of my constant I'm an open book. I'll tell anybody anything about my life, pretty much. I mean, there are those private moments that are private because they're shared with someone else, kind of thing. But my wife, long ago, I used to write for the Houston Chronicle here, a blog for them called Newlywed. Right, it was the first year we got married, and she was horrified by the idea at first, and then she caught on that I wasn't gonna reveal anything too personal about her, and then she got into the spirit of it, So I think that knowing, I see what you're saying, and knowing that that's your space, like. You're forming a relationship with that reader, with all those readers, so you can set the ground rules on how that relationship is going to work. And I like the idea of saying, I think I like your approach more than your friend's approach, in that you've got certain bits that are going to be cordoned off for you can only access this if you've given me your email address. I like that idea. What about do you think that's limiting in terms of story or in terms of brand? I mean, is that limiting you in any way?
Oh, hell yes. And I'm really glad it does.
Oh,
I am
good.
so not about numbers and quantity.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that at all. Like the times I've had the biggest traffic spikes, I got mentioned on Tim Ferriss's site and stuff like that, and that went nuts after that.
Yeah.
Have been the times I've been most unhappy in my business. Because people would come in who just weren't, Free Range Humans has a feel to it. Yeah. And it's very different from lots of other people in this space. Like we're a lot more thoughtful. It's just a different feel.
Yeah.
And it would just be flooded. It was like suddenly you'd had a private party and it got flooded. And I'm like, I like new people.
Yeah.
We have a lot of new people every single day. Like we get good traffic and a lot of signups. But a flood in, it was really overwhelming. Actually, interesting enough, my response to that was a mild freak out. And then going in and writing, I thought, what is it that I'm afraid to write now that there are people in here who are very differently minded, like people who are more into get rich quick stuff, or, are really cynical or whatever. That's just so not Free Range Humans. And I just wrote, I can't remember what post I wrote, but whatever post I wrote, I designed it to put them off and that my readers would love it. So it's probably something very personal and vulnerable. And it took me about 2 weeks to write. So I skipped a week and I thought, what am I going to write? And I thought of it and I thought, no, I really want to write this piece. Because I'm afraid of what they'll think. And if I don't write this piece, I'll continue to be afraid of what this huge influx of people think.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the piece. And I was in the Daily Mail in the UK, which is just not a paper I ever thought that I'd have a positive spread in. And I did. I had a 2-page spread that was very positive, and I'm not allowed to read the comments on that page because it's not a readership that I would have associated with my blog. But as it turns out, I had a huge influx. And once then I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? So I did the same. And I think it's a really good move whenever you're afraid, for whatever reason. For me, it was influx of traffic from sources that surprised me. Not from like a friendly blog like yours, where I'd imagine all your listeners are people who are like-minded, but people who are like, "Ooh, wait a second, hold on, wait, I'm not sure your readers are the same as mine," is to write what you think you're afraid to write, because once you've done it, I just watched those unsubscribes go, and I was like, thank God, because there's probably 50% of them that were great people that are still there. Actually, probably a lot more than that, like 80% were amazing. They're still around. And then you stop being scared. And I think that is the key. Whenever I found myself be scared, I remember I had a friend who said the biggest thing that kills success is success itself.
Yeah.
And I've never felt that more than when I got a lot of press, for example, because you suddenly think, what should I write? Who am I allowed to be now?
Yeah.
And it's, I actually took 2 months off my business at in that year, because I thought, I'm losing myself in who I think I'm allowed to be, and I need to get that back, because you can't be a successful writer or author or storyteller for a long time if you don't know that. Yeah. If you start, you obviously write to your audience, but there's a difference to writing to your audience and writing just what you think they'll hear in just the words you think they want, because actually that's not what they want.
Right.
What people respond to the most are the posts that I post thinking, oh my God, everyone's going to leave now. And that's when everyone goes, I'm the same. I feel the same about you. That thing that you shared, I recognize myself, much like you said, I recognize myself in that. And so that's why it's so important, because you can't tell a good story when you're not allowed to find your own story, when you're not allowed to, and your story doesn't have to be about you. It can be about a way that you see the world, that you think no one else can see it that way. You think you're a bit of a freak for seeing it that way. Even if it's about your opinion on a certain food, if you're a food blogger and you're like, no one's going to think this, and you say it thinking everyone's going to like slam you, and you get most people going, I thought that too. Gosh, really? That's not just me. And so that's why it's important. I think that's why I put the filter up. Most bloggers don't do that. I have obviously, lowered massively my numbers as a result. Because I get people replying, going, "How do I share this with people?" I'm like, "Forward them the email, hun. That's one's private."
Yeah,
and they're like, "But I have, a huge Facebook following." I'm like, "Yeah, sorry about that." But I'd say I still publish on my blog a lot more now, a lot more.
And it's safe. You feel safer there.
Well, frankly, I just feel like I've had so much out now.
Yeah.
There's less to worry about. I'm like, I put some really personal stuff in what I've written. I'm just like, whatever, I'm publishing. I don't care as much anymore. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I have a big
that is
don't
pretty
give a damn
awesome
thing going on.
That's great though, because what you're saying is you're writing to the audience that you want, not the audience you necessarily have. So I love that idea, and it's the tribe's idea, right? I mean, you're writing to your tribe.
I'm writing to my tribe,
yes.
And it's really interesting. Like the other thing is, there will be members of your tribe who are great, but who are looking for something from you that you don't want to be. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people make the mistake and go, "My tribe says this." And I'm like, "How many people said that?" And they'll be like, "One." And I'm like, "That's that person's probably great, but you don't need to change your entire strategy for them, because they're probably going to love other stuff." So people have asked me, a couple of people, not huge numbers, have said, "I really like more detailed posts on the sort of the technicalities of travel." And I'm like, I don't find that very interesting.
Yeah, there are other sites for that.
That's what I said. I said, here are some of my friends who write on that, and they're great. And I'm not going to write. And they're like, "But we want to hear it back from you." And I'm like, that's not going to work, right? Because I'm not very good at the details of travel.
Right.
I forgot to get my entry visa to the US when I was getting on a plane to the US. I have so many stories. You do not want me to tell you what to pack and what details to do, because you're just going to end up badly for the entire. So that's now my story. People, when I've written posts on, people go, it's like maybe getting scared of going, "But how's that going to work if I'm away for 9 months?" I'm like, look, guys, I forget everything. I don't really remember the visa side, and I'm pretty okay. So whatever you do is probably going to be a step up from that. So you're fine. So there's still a story. Even the story you don't want to tell, there's still a story.
Right, yeah. And it sounds like a much more interesting story anyway, so.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's telling the truth rather than telling what you think you should be saying.
so I can tell you, by the way, that this is a much more fun interview than the last time, and not no offense. I mean, it was a great interview last time, but the reason I can say that is we already hit the 40-minute mark, and I feel like
Oh.
we just got started. So, and I don't want to soak up much more of your time, but do you have tips? I just wanted to get your perspective on. Uh, I'm an average listener. I'm sitting here wondering, how do I make my story what I really want it to be? And there's no way you're going to answer this in a really quick 30-second quip. But what's a starting point for somebody if they want to shape their own story? Whether they want to be a free range human or whether they want a 4-hour work week or whatever, where does someone start? How do they start writing their own story?
Do you mean writing it or actually
Well,
working out what it
I was
is?
speaking metaphorically, but yeah, working out, who you are, I think is difficult for people. It was difficult for me. I'm still figuring it out, 41 years
Same.
later. So,
Absolutely. Still figuring it out. And I
yeah.
think that's number one is let go of the idea you're ever going to figure it out totally.
Yep.
It's always a work in progress. Number two, really get into this idea of understanding there's a difference between being able to do something and that being the thing that you are drawn to do. So the things that you're drawn to do. So you might be able, like, beware of the things that you're good at because you can end up doing them for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
So check that. Check your story. Are you just pulling out those things
Yeah.
and you following them? And the third thing would be look at what you literally can't help doing that you are now overlooking. And this goes for everyone. If you're just trying to work out what sort of writer you are, you're going to try to work out your bio, if you're trying to actually shape your life, you need to start understanding your moments of unconscious competence. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of ways of doing that. There's a series of personality profiles, there's a bunch of different ones. There's a lot of exercises, and it's actually a journey. You don't just sit there overnight and be like, oh, got it.
Yeah.
You do work it out, but it is key because once you have that, and once I've worked out mine, you can do so many things in the world,
Yeah.
but like I could dive into interior design tomorrow and I would know who I was and who I wasn't in there. I can even tell you now what I wouldn't do. And I
Yeah.
can do that in any field. And that is a freedom to have
I
by
love
your
that.
side.
I love that idea of sort of you can somewhat master anything that you want to master it with that idea. Like,
Absolutely. 'Cause you're
yeah.
not learning again. You're using who you've always
Right,
been, but we
right.
didn't know that. Most of
Yeah.
us don't even know that.
No. And you talked about the profiles, and you actually have some of those profiles on your website, right?
I do in my book in the
Yeah.
I have a section in there and you're right. I go onto the website in the personality section. I can probably send you the link for that.
Cool. That'd be great. Yeah. And
Yep.
I'll put that in the show notes. And for anybody listening, if you haven't read it yet, you need to pick up "Be a Free Range Human" because that is it's one. I have a list of books that I give, like when I have clients. I'm coaching someone, or if someone just happens to ask me, I have a list, and that book's on it. So, and it's only like 5 books long right now. So, there you go. You're in the top
Thank
5.
you. I love that.
So,
Thank you
yeah.
so much
Hopefully
for
one day I'll
talking
have
about
one
this as
too.
well. I think it's such a great and important topic to talk about storytelling, especially for people who are storytellers.
No, and thank you for agreeing to come back after our last call. And I know right by this point everyone's thinking, "Man, what the hell happened on that call?" And it involved pantslessness and me being in a closet. But yeah, so you know what we did? We defaulted to our everyday roles, our everyday story.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%. And it shows you like you can have a totally usable thing, but if it's not the story that you really mean to tell, it's not as good
yeah,
like ever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you want to be you want to intentional is the word I was looking for. You want to be intentional in your story. So thank you so much for being on. And if anyone out there is interested, they can check you out on it's free-range-humans.com, right?
That's the one, freerangehumans.com or beafreerangehuman.com
Be
is
a
my
free
book
range human.
website.
Okay, very cool. And I'll put links to that in the show notes. And thank you so much, Marianne, for talking to me twice. Let's do this again someday. You're
This sounds
awesome.
great.
Yeah, well, and if we really just kind of scratched the surface anyway, so we got plenty more story stuff to talk about someday. So,
Love that.
uh, Thank you so much. Take care. Go be all free range and humany.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, there you go. That was that was a great interview. And I have to tell you, I really love talking to Marianne because she is, first of all, she's very excitable. She gets right on board with whatever you're doing, and that comes from a life well spent. I think she's got this fantastic career she's built, she controls, and you could do that too. That's what's amazing. This is not. There's no real secret here. This is. And it's taken me a while to learn this as well. Okay, so don't feel bad if you've been thinking about this and you haven't made much progress. I've gone through the same thing. So the trick here isn't really a trick. It's more about just deciding what it is you love to do and then going out and doing it. One of the things that she's a fan of and I'm a fan of is that once you've decided on something, take an action, jump. Don't spend tons of time researching, because I think research is great. I mean, I love doing research, but I think at times we use research as an excuse to kind of give us a way out, to kind of talk us out of the crazy decision we're about to make. By no means should you just run out and quit your job and go, try to make a career out of, ping pong or basket weaving or any of those things. But you got plenty of other opportunities to build a career that's a little more free range and frees you up from your location. So why not explore that? So anyway, if you haven't read the book, please do. It's Be a Free Range Human by Marianne Cantwell. It is fantastic. I've read it in digital form and listened to it in audiobook. Both are great. And in other news, I'm still working on, Nick Thacker and I are about to release our first episode of The Lucid, and you can pre-order that right now for just like less than $3, like 1 penny less than $3. $2.99 on Amazon. The pre-order is available now. If you go search my name or Nick's name, search either Tumlinson or Thacker and Lucid, and those terms will bring you straight to the pre-order on Amazon. You should really check that out. I am putting the finishing touches. I'm editing, actually, my second Sawyer Jackson book, which is called Sawyer Jackson and the Shadow Strait. And that, I've got a release date goal of October 12th, because that happens to be my birthday. So I'm trying to give myself a little bit of a birthday gift. Actually, I want to give the gift to you, because I think you're going to love that book. It's fantastic. If you'd like to see a little sneak peek of it, I put a story. It's a clip from the book, and you can read it on my blog. And you can the whole title of the piece is Sneak Peek: Sawyer Jackson and the Shadow Strait, Two Wolves at War. If you just search Two Wolves at War and Kevin Tumlinson, I'm pretty sure you'll bring it up from Google. But go check it out on my website at kevintumlinson.com. Speaking of .coms, I just picked up wordslingerpodcast.com, which right now points to the podcast page on kevintumlinson.com. So you can go to that domain. I'm working on the website, and eventually it'll have its own presence. But if you've got any questions for me, there's a call me button there. It works very cool. Click on that and Google, and you enter your phone number, and Google Voice will call you, and you can leave a voicemail for me. And then it sends it straight to my inbox where I can play it on air, and I'll answer any question you got, anything. And I mean, trust me, anything, if it's appropriate for general audience. Actually, it doesn't have to be all that general. It could be PG, I guess, PG-13. So if you don't want to leave a voicemail, you can always send me a question via email. There's an email button right there on the same page. Go click that. Hook me up with whatever question you got. I will be happy to answer. You can also, if you're in the self-publishing game, if you're an author or you want to be an author, there's two things. First, I offer author coaching, and I've had a lot of fun doing that. That's actually given me quite a charge as I talk to clients. There's just something about helping people get into a field that you're really interested in yourself, that you're passionate about yourself, helping people to to kind of grab hold of that and grow in it. There's just something really energizing about that. So I offer a free 30-minute session, and you can, it's absolutely free. Like I don't expect you to come back for the paid sessions later. I'm not looking for that if that's not going to be helpful to you. I've actually had clients that I think I just knocked out everything they needed in that 30-minute session. So that's fine. I like that. It is supposed to be a revenue stream for me, but you know what? I love helping people out anyway. So come check that out. If you have any interest whatsoever in being an author, we'll set up a time to do a 30-minute chat. I always give you a recording of it so that you can play it back, so you get a little bonus out of that. That's a free 30 minutes. So and it's just a chance for us to talk. So check that out. And in the self-publishing arena, we've also got, I have started co-hosting with Nick Thacker on his Self-Publishing Answers podcast. So none of those, I don't think any of those episodes have gone live yet, but we've put 2 or 3 in the can, so I think they're still being edited. But if you are interested in self-publishing and telling your story on the page, those are 2 good options. Come get some coaching from me, or you can get some answers on the self-publishing game from me and Nick Thacker, who's a very bright. I mean, he's lining me up. I mean, he's got me jumping through a few hoops to get my game a little polished. So thrilled to be working with him. We're co-authoring the Lucid together, so it's been great getting to know him, working with him. So come check him out. Come check me out. You can visit me online at kevintumlinson.com, where you can learn more about me and my books. And now we have the nifty new wordslingerpodcast.com, which is, that's going to be a resource. So check back there often. And there's going to be a lot more there than just this podcast. I think you're going to dig it. So that's it for this week. That music means we're leaving. So I'm so glad you were here to talk to me. Visit me online at kevintumlinson.com/podcast and leave me a voicemail. That will become wordslinger.com. And if you have any questions, please fling them my way. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me. I'll talk to you next week.
Word Slinger.